Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Jim, wherever you are, Jim, for inviting me. It is good to be back at the department. It is good to be back here with this conference. It's been a number of years since I've been here. I know. I'm sorry. I don't apologize because it's not my fault, but I am sorry about the bad timing from Jim's perspective of scheduling this conference and not having the budget available, not really having the FY22 information available until I believe 1:22 this morning. It was posted. So I guess the one thing I can't apologize to you on is that you have to now listen to a budget guy talk who can't talk about his budget. So I don't know if there's anything worse than that. But as Sam said, I am back in the department. Happy to be back with a lot of good friends and colleagues, like Secretary Wormuth. Been back for 9 months now, and man, a lot has happened already since I've been back. Things that you never would have guessed a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe. Came in. The National Guard was still on Capitol Hill, securing the Capitol after an attempted insurrection. We spent a lot of the late summer working an unprecedented scope of airlift of Afghans and American citizens out of Afghanistan. That was just the product of an incredible amount of hard work, an unprecedented use of DoD humanitarian authorities, DoD humanitarian funding, but all of that, of course, was darkened or tarnished by the loss of American and Afghan lives. So I know it's hard for people to feel good about that, but that was an incredible effort that we undertook, very unusual and unprecedented effort. We've also had, of course, COVID has been a big feature of the landscape since I've been back. Infection rates have been, as I recall, up then down, then up then down. The Pentagon feels nearly empty a lot of the time that I've been back. The parking lots, the hallways, some of the places inside are closed. There's days where you barely leave your office and you only talk to other human beings via a video screen, so it's been a strange experience, very different than my first 8 years there. But you know, as we've gone through the Delta and the Omicron, I do now feel like we have the light at the end of the tunnel for a pandemic that's over 2 years long. And again, who would have even imagined a pandemic that lasted 2 years? This is also, now that I'm back, the end of the Budget Control Act era, so I'm glad about that. I was never a fan of the BCA. So far, however, as you can all see, it's had no impact on the culture of perpetual lengthy CRs. One can always hope, but you know, we are today tracking toward the 5th longest CR in the department's history this year. I can maybe talk about this a little more, but that is a big concern of mine. Some of you may know that the chiefs and I testified on this subject in January in front of the House. One other thing that's new for us, having to worry about inflation again for the first time, certainly since the housing bubble, the housing crash, and the Great Recession of 2008, but actually it's been much longer than that we've had to seriously track and worry about inflation. So that's been a big part of what I've been working on in building the 23 budget, but also, you know, it's just a day-to-day challenge that is not one that we've had before. We've been very fortunate for a long time on that front. And last but not least, of course, we have warfare on the European continent again. Declarations by experts from Bob Gates, Rick Fontaine, and others that we now have the end of the Cold War era. Personally, I would probably date that from at least back to the 2016 Russian interference in our elections, if we're talking about when a Cold War has been resuming again. But certainly, we have you know, a very dominant feature of the landscape here, and also very new. Again, I want to stress that a lot of these things are not just you know, they're new and they're different. This version of geopolitical struggle is unlike any I think we've seen, you know, on this scale, right? The featured weapons in this fight, or the featured tools in this fight, are things like sanctions, boycotts. People are, you know, you're reading about commodity market impacts from wheat to oil. So this is not. First of all, of course, it's not. The United States is not at war with Russia. NATO is not at war with Russia, and we are doing. I think we're doing a good, strong NATO deterrence, and we're assisting the Ukrainians in their fight. But again, this is probably a different scenario than people had envisioned. I mean, not that Putin's behavior is surprising, particularly given his track record, but this is not a classic NATO scenario. So we have a lot of new things on our plate, a lot of things to be concerned about. On the more positive side, I do think that we're about to turn a corner on national security. I think we have a possibility of greater focus, greater consensus, more robust funding, more stable funding, if we can seize this opportunity. And by say we, I see all of us here in industry, in Congress, in the department, in the other agencies. As Sam made reference to, and you may have talked about already before I got here, the Omnibus Appropriations Bill, which we've been waiting for a long time, filed this morning. Looks like about a $30 billion increase to DOD, so a little bit above the NDA level. Largely concentrated in procurement and R&D. I suspect that you were all expecting that. We were expecting that. So it looks like about 12+ billion of that increase to our request came in the procurement accounts and over 7 in R&D. In addition to that, of course, there's a supplemental for Ukraine response, 13.6 billion by my math that I was doing this morning while talking to the Secretary. We asked for 10, we got 13.5. The big move that Congress made was on drawdown, which was something that, again, we knew over the weekend was happening. We asked to increase our drawdown authority, which is not DOD's drawdown authority, it's the President's drawdown authority, but we asked to increase that by 1.2 billion. The Omnibus increases it by 3 billion, so a big increase there. And commensurate with that, we had asked to replenish the stocks that we're donating, from javelins to stingers to body armor, all kinds of things. So the backfill amount on the DoD side went up by the same 1.75 billion. So that's the big move, really. The thing that increased the Ukraine Supplemental from the 10 billion that was asked for to the 13.5 billion or so that we got was really in the drawdown space. There was a little bit of increases on some of the other State Department things that I haven't had time to run down this morning. But you know, that's a very hopeful sign and a show of strong support. Very much in line with what you saw, I think, at the State of the Union address, the strong bipartisan support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. We're seeing that in the supplemental. Very grateful that Congress jumped on that, and I have a feeling that it kind of helped push the thing over the edge and get it done. You may have seen that the appropriators filed a 4-day CR to give a little more time in case this giant bill can't be passed by Friday. But we're very optimistic about the way that's looking. We are about to release. I wish I could give you the date. Can't give you the date because I don't know the date, not because I'm keeping it a secret from you. We have a projected date to release the budget, but it is not a firm date. Very soon. This budget has been guided by the National Defense Strategy we've been working on. Don't know the date that we're going to be able to release that either. That is above my pay grade, unfortunately. There are a few things in that category. We are very hopeful to have a classic rollout of a national security strategy from the White House, followed by a national defense strategy from the Secretary, followed by the budget. That is still possible, although it's getting more sporty every day to think that we're going to be able to do those things with any kind of separation in the way that we would like to do. But one thing I am confident of as the budget guy is that the budget will be released. So whether it will be done with the right order and the right scene setting, that I don't control. But we will have a budget coming out soon that is strategy based, and I think it's going to be a strong one. I want to emphasize that it is not a budget that was rewritten at the last minute because of what Putin is doing in Ukraine. There's been a lot of reasons, I'm sure familiar to all of you, about why this has taken time. The backlog in 22 on Build Back Better, the backlog in 22 on appropriations has in turn, we're another plane in the pattern. We're like the third plane in the pattern, so we were backed up behind the other two. And so we expect to be landing our plane very soon. We are done substantively. We are now doing the final assembly and starting to put the paint on and everything, but we are done, and we hope that we'll be able to present that to you soon. In that budget, again, I probably don't want to get myself in trouble by saying too much about it, but you know, we have a lot of areas we've looked at. I would say, you know, space probably is probably emerged in our internal reviews as the most important foundational area for everything that we're doing, everything that we need to be doing, whether it's versus China, versus Russia, anybody else. This is just an example of, I mean, we looked at, and I see folks like my friend Dr. Morin here who know all the areas that you look at in a program budget review when they build the budget. You're looking at NC3, you're looking at the triad, you're looking at ground forces, tactical forces, naval forces, ISR, All these things, we did look at all these things again. It's been a pretty comprehensive review, as you know, in the first year of administration. You tend to not get, you're not able to do that comprehensive review in the first year of administration. This is when you really catch up and try and do your best thinking. And I think we have a very strong product, again, that we're going to be able to present very, very shortly. I thought I might, given that I can't talk about our budget, I thought I might, if it's okay with you, Jim, sort of respond to a couple questions that you told me that you might, you thought people might want to hear about.
Yes, sir. Any of the 6,000 I sent, sir. That's
okay, okay. So, and I'm just going to take them in the order you sent them to me. They're all good questions. Am I seeing signs that Putin's invasion of Ukraine changed public views of defense spending? Yes, I think so. Again, I do want to emphasize that we are not building, we are not submitting to the Congress in a couple weeks a wartime budget. We are not at war with Russia. I know Putin would like to make this about the United States versus Russia, would like to make it about Russia versus NATO, or about us threatening him and a lot of the the false flag stuff that they do. We are deterring Russia, and defending NATO. But I do think that public views are going to change on this. It is clearly, it was shocking to a lot of Europeans to see full-scale war on the European continent. I mean, obviously we've seen conflict on the European continent in the Balkans and here and there, and this is not his first incursion into Ukraine even. But on this scale, I think maybe some people continued to hope against hope, despite the way he was amassing forces, that it wouldn't really happen on this scale, but it has. So I think that has. I mean, clearly, if you look at Germany, for example, I mean, what could be more striking of their sudden change, and I think a welcome one. But I think that there will be a not quite as dramatic impact, but a similar directional, similar vector impact in the United States on change views of defense spending. I know Chairman Smith has spoken about this already a little bit. Your second question was about what would be the likely buckets of immediate growth in the Omnibus. So I am able equally to speculate with you, because we're no longer speculating. It's just a question of how fast we can read based on things that were posted this morning, and I've not read very far into it. That's for later in the day. But again, I saw the modernization, the acquisition budget primarily be the emphasis, no increase in personnel spending at all. A modest increase in the O&M accounts, $2 billion or so, but $12 billion in procurement. And again, about $7 billion in R&D. There were things in there I think that everybody was expecting a second DDG. I have not had time to look at the Aegis specifically. I believe C-130s were added as well. You also asked about the Ukraine Supplemental. Again, we asked for about $4 billion for DoD and about $5 billion for DoD, about $5 billion for state, AID, various international disaster relief functions, and a small amount for several other key agencies, Treasury, Commerce, Energy, DOJ. Everything that we asked for was funded at approximately the level that we asked for, not identical. Some of our DoD accounts were identical, some were changed, same with some of the other agencies. Again, the big move was that they went much heavier on drawdown, which is very consistent with where the Secretary Austin is. He has been admonishing us at every daily meeting, and we do have daily meetings on this, to focus on helping the Ukrainians with our drawdown authorities to go as fast as we can, as long as we're able to, safely. Obviously, there's a big element of here of needing to be safe and responsible about what we're doing, but that has been a big priority. Congress recognized that and was very supportive of the drawdown authority. I think you'll see in the appropriations bill there's also a slight increase in funding, not a order of magnitude increase in funding, a slight increase in funding in the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, but that is a more cumbersome tool to use, and that's why all of us in DoD, White House, state, we're all kind of gravitating toward more drawdown as the more useful tool in this moment. You asked about what are the odds of additional supplemental to support rotational forces in Europe, and Jim, I'm not sure if you meant additional this year or additional in 23 or both. Really hard to speculate into 23. Obviously, we will see over the coming weeks and months what happens in Ukraine. Is it a situation that bogs down into something that resembles the sort of stasis that you had in eastern Ukraine over the last couple of years, or does it go in some more dramatic direction of a yes/no answer kind of situation. I do believe that we will probably need additional funding at DoD for this. The funding that we requested, other than the drawdown, which again I've said was the big move, was for the deployments the Secretary has ordered to date. So if the Secretary orders more deployments or extends deployments, our costs will start to go up above what we projected. Now, if they don't go up a lot, obviously we have some other tools to deal with that via reprogrammings. If they go up a lot, then we would probably come back. The Secretary, I think, has, as I understand it, briefed members of Congress that is an option that we reserve, is to come back and say if we need more, which is something that any Secretary, I think, would take that position in this situation. So we feel good about where we are right now, but it's hard to predict if we will need any more troops. We are seeing, I mean, one thing that's so encouraging here is you're seeing so many NATO allies step up across the board. So this is not U.S. do everything while everybody stands around and watches. This has really been encouraging to see the response on the drawdown side, on supplying Ukrainians, on stepping up, on all kinds of fronts by many NATO partners. So I don't automatically do anything that gets done is going to be done only by us, and it's going to require a lot of funding. That may be the case, but things are looking a little more balanced across the alliance than they have sometimes in the past. Inflation. You asked a question about inflation. What's the impact on our buying power? Where does it hurt us the most? Where does it impact us the most? Spent a lot of time on that this fall, internal to the department, working on this and messaging, talking, negotiating with OMB on this. We do recognize that we're in a new situation, again, one that we've not had to worry about at DoD very much. I would say if one considers inflation to include pay raises, and some may not. By law, pay raises are not cost of living increases. They are geared toward wage increases in the private sector because they are a metric you use to assess in your competition for talent, you know, where your wages need to be. But assuming for a second that you considered a pay raise part of inflation, then I would say the total cost of inflation on us is about 40% falling in the O&M accounts to include all the things that we buy, the goods and services, contracts that we buy with O&M and civilian pay raises. About 20% then would be military pay and benefit increases. Again, if you consider those inflation, that'd be about 20. Procurement is about another 20% of the increase. Of course, that's all goods and services. Everything else, R&D, construction, everything else that we do would be the last 15 to 20% of the impact of inflation on us. One thing that I've kind of seen in an article here or there that I do want to just mention is that don't be looking for a defense budget that is going up 7% because of inflation. The CPI is not a metric of the inflation impact on the Department of Defense. It does not reflect what the market basket of what we buy. We have a bunch of different tools that address different niches of pricing on the Defense Department. So we have, again, if you consider a pay raise to be a reaction in some measure to inflation, we have pay raises. We have basic allowance for housing that is tied to housing market prices. We have fuel we consider separately. And of course, we track the fuel market. We consume 75% of the federal government's energy, so we are very much interested in fuel prices. We don't control fuel prices. We can't impact fuel prices. We are big enough to have a big bill, but way too small to have any impact on the markets. So but that has its own mechanism. Basically, me working with DLA to adjust prices that we charge, and then messaging Congress if we need more or less money for that. We use a different index than the CPI for everything else for all our goods and services, like every agency. We work with OMB, and we use metrics that are consistent across the government, so one agency isn't assuming different pricing than other agencies. But again, none of the things that we use has anything to do with the CPI. Again, we're not buying food and rental housing in the same way as a Defense Department that goes into that metric. So we are not facing 7% inflation in the Defense Department. Now, what's going to happen in the future? Obviously, if I knew that, I would be doing something else for a living. But the big concern that we've had, that I've had, is catching up. Inflation is a here and now thing. We build budgets 1 year at a time. Inflation tends to get looked at, inflation from 22 to 23. The biggest near-term concern that we have really is the inflation that did occur in 21 that was higher than projected, the inflation that is occurring in 22 that was higher than projected. So my emphasis has been on getting us caught up on that as best we can. I have no ability, let me be clear, to catch up on that when I'm under CR, other than to adjust prices internally, but I can't get more resources under a CR clearly. But in building the 23 budget, and I'll be able to explain this better when we get to that point, we have paid a lot of attention to sort of building the pricing of the things that are in the budget for 23 to be accurate to what they're going to cost based on what has happened over the last year and a half since the last time that economic assumptions were built for us, which was right as the administration was coming in. So there was kind of, obviously everything is rushed, and I wasn't there for the first couple months. I've been back, as I say, for 9 months since June. So I wasn't around when whatever was estimated, calculated for inflation when the 22 budget was built, but the reality has been different, and so trying to roll that into 23 has been a big priority of mine. The analogy I like to use is as we are building a budget and we're doing all the different program budget review meetings on subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, I sort of liking it to going through the supermarket and putting things in your cart. Yes, I would like one of those. I'd like 2 of those to be in my shopping cart when I get to the checkout line. But when we get to the checkout line, prices have changed. Everything that we put in the shopping cart was priced over a year ago at what are no longer accurate prices. So again, I spent a lot of time working with OMB and the White House on that issue just to make sure, and the Secretary was very interested and very supportive of this, that when we get to the checkout line, that we're putting stuff in there at prices that are the right prices so that we can build the things and not have a nightmare of execution, which is, as comptroller, would be my nightmare, right? If I had 1,000 things, all of which were priced wrong, certainly you could to some extent move things around and have 500 of them be right and 500 of them be even worse. That's not the world that we want to live in. So that has been a big focus of ours. Okay, I think I beat that one to death. What major muscle moves are important in deterring China? I think I would say my view is that what has emerged from our deliberations is that space is just the foundation of where we need to continue to improve. We are strong in space. I'm not saying that we're not, but we need to continue to improve in that area. And this is going to be an area, I think, where we're going to be able to talk about some of the things we're doing to the public, and there's other things we're not going to be able to talk about. But it has been again just a huge area of focus for us, and I think that we have been, in retrospect. I was out of government really when this happened, the creation of Space Force, but I think that has been helpful to us. We were just talking the other day internally, a couple of us, that the deliberations on this seemed a little more focused now than they might have been 5 or 6 years ago, partly for that reason. So that is important. Artificial intelligence is another, I would say, just about foundational issue going forward for us. Everyone has noticed, I'm sure, in both the previous administration and this administration, and the White House focus on supply chain, industrial base, microelectronics. Again, these are very important, kind of cross-cutting issues that don't apply to just one weapon system or one theater. So I think some of these more foundational things, space, AI, supply chain resilience, are going to be some of the big focuses that you should see from us. There are also, of course, specific to China, I would say defense of Guam is a big one for us. Integrated air missile defense of Guam is something that is very important going forward. So those I think are those are the key questions that I thought that you asked, and I wonder if I could just ask if you want to then turn to any other questions now. If I had a budget to present, I would have some kind of a good wrap up.
Sir, we've got 3 or 4 minutes.
Sure.
So go right ahead, dive in, guys.
Hi. Hi, Mr. McCord, Tony Bertuca, Inside Defense. I know you beat inflation to death, but let's give it one more kick. Is there an assumption then that DoD has that is the new assumption that you're using if you're not going to have the CPI assumption, and is that above or below, say, 5%?
Yeah. The index that we use is called the GDP Deflator, and that is not something that people focus on as much, but again, we are an agency that buys goods and services. It's a fairly accurate, for us, metric, and it is not running at anything like 5%. Again, there's sort of two parts to this. There is, starting with 22, what's the increase from 22 to 23? That's what you sort of are literally putting into the budget, right? But my concern is more what happened before then and making sure that we are rolling that in as well. But even that combined, it's not that bad. But again, when we're now in the 700s, every percent is $7 billion, right? So even 3% inflation or 3% pricing changes is still a lot of money, and that's why it was such a big focus of mine to try and get that as accurate as we could. And I do appreciate that we had good rapport with OMB on that.
Mike, thanks for doing this and for your return to public service. This is a question that's probably only fair for a two-time comptroller. At the intersection of resource management and geopolitics, Putin's invasion has slaughtered innocents, has depleted his own army. Maybe the biggest single geopolitical effect, though, is German defense investment going from 1.5% of GDP to 2%. I mean, that's like an entire Russian defense budget increase right there, nearly. How do you think about more capable allies in Europe and around the world as a result of these investments that this behavior is triggering in your calculus about optimizing, maximizing U.S. capability?
Thanks. It's a great question, and I was going to say it's an exciting development, but of course it's for I'm not happy. I'm happy to see it, but I'm not happy for the reason for it, I guess, right? I personally don't know enough about what the Germans are going to invest in and what quality that's going to produce. One of the things that I would say that we're looking at right now is, understandably, this is a rapidly evolving situation in Ukraine, and individual nations are trying to help the Ukrainians with the things that they have. And one of the many European Command challenges right now is trying to coordinate so that you don't have 10 people giving the same thing while nobody else is helping them over here. I would sort of make an analogy to that, to what I would hope will happen, that obviously the Germans have every right to focus their increased investment on their unique national priorities, but one would hope that there is a good conversation, which I will not be leading, but a good conversation within the NAC and other places about how they best could help the alliance with that. They're under, every country has its own interests that overlay, as you know, with what they count as their NATO contribution. And I just don't know enough about what the Germans have in mind. The number was shocking, really. I mean, in a good way, a big step up. I think it's going to be welcomed, and I look forward to finding out exactly what they have in mind for it. I don't know the answer to that yet, but I do think, as I tried to allude to in my remarks earlier, that we should not think of this in the old model of the U.S. is going to everybody stand back while I do everything. I don't think that that's what we're looking at here. And you can especially see this with the Eastern European countries, Romania, people like that, and the Poles. They know what Putin is and Putin's regime. They have always been interested in stepping up and punching above their weight. But to see more Western European step up too, is to see the possibility of Sweden and Finland maybe contemplating NATO membership. These are interesting times, as the proverb goes, and it kind of takes me back to when I was younger, and we had we had just excellent series of strategy hearings that my boss at the time, Senator Nunn, had around 1990, as the Warsaw Pact had collapsed the year before, and everyone was trying to get their heads around what did this mean, this incredible victory we had won, without firing a shot, so to speak. And you look at this now and say, well, was that wrong, or were we overly optimistic? Maybe in one or two places. But if you think about the difference from then to now, obviously look at the millions of people and the millions of square miles that have gone from his team to our team. It is not the same situation as it was before. So history is only going to guide us, think, so much in like what is Germany's posture going to be now compared to the Cold War days of where there was maybe more concern about a conventional Russian force being able to overrun. I don't think we're in that same place right now. So I'm very intrigued. Long answer to say I'm very intrigued to find out what the Germans have in mind exactly for this. But it's a very welcome development, and I think that absolutely will need to be part of our planning going forward as we build the 24 program and so on, to think about what does EUCOM look like from the SAC-year hat and not just the U.S. hat.
Mike, a quick question, just to wrap up. You've got 2 decades experience on Capitol Hill with an authorizing committee. Now you're in your second tour. We've seen from time to time dysfunction on the defense committee side, but we've never really seen it like we have on defense approach this year or even on appropriations. We're 5 months through the fiscal year, and next week hopefully we'll get a final bill. As comptroller and looking out forward on the requirements of the department, what does that do to you? How much harder is it?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a terrible last question because I could rant about this for a while, but in the 2 decades, sort of actually just back to Jamie's question, I was sort of thinking about the end of the Cold War in about 1990. So for the 2 decades that followed, an appropriations bill on average was about 25 days late. So into October, but not even into November on average. As you all remember, 2011, the Budget Control Act started in 2012, but actually it really started in 2011 with the hostage taking that led to the Budget Control Act that year. So starting from 2011 through now, 12 years, that average has gone from about 25 days to 120 days. So 4 months. We have spent 48 months of the last 12 years, or 4 years, in a CR, which that is pathetic. And I know that some might say I live in a glass house. My budget is not over on time. That is true. So I don't say that this is all one person's fault, one party's fault, anything like that, or that the executive branch can't do better as well. But it's very discouraging to see that and many of us are old enough to remember, you and me included, when a CR was 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it was actually time to get something done, not defaulting straight to 10 weeks into mid-December as your first thing with no serious effort underway to solve the problem in those first 10 weeks even. So that really needs to change. There is, and Dr. Morin is on it, a new commission on PPB that I think is a welcome conversation that the executive branch and the legislative branch can have. PPB is literally speaking only an executive branch internal to the Pentagon process, but the commission, I would argue, makes no sense if it doesn't have the conversation about the relationship between Congress and the department in budgeting. And so we need to be open. I think everybody needs to be open on ways that this could be done better. People say they want more agility. That's got to be part of the equation. One of the questions that you often get asked, though, is can you point real specifically to the damage of long CRs? And it is a challenge, right? Because the organism long ago adapted to this world, as Al and others probably know, right? No one thinks of running a contract in October anymore, and so you can't point to the contract that lapsed in October because there aren't any, or there hardly are any, right? So that pointing to real specific things has always been a challenge for us. But if you think bigger picture to say the saying from C.Q. Brown, right? Accelerate, change, or lose. I mean, you're going exactly in the wrong direction if you're doing that. And so I do think, I do hope if there's a silver lining to the suffering of the people of Ukraine right now, it's that this is a little bit of a wake-up call that national security, we all of us that work in this know it's serious business, but we should, part of it, be serious about it then, treat it seriously, and get things done more on time. I don't fault the committees at all. I mean, I know that the staff there are full of professionals who could have done this bill months ago. Obviously, some things have changed since then, Red Hill or other things, and so we would have had maybe an outdated number here or there, but that can all be worked if we really believe in an agile process. Yeah, the damage is somewhat hidden, but it is real, and if we believe, especially with respect to China, that we need to go faster, this needs to be part of the conversation, absolutely.
Outstanding. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.